The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly fell silent as the holographic display flickered to life. 300 representatives from across known space watched the dying star pulse with unstable orange light. The sun was collapsing, and 12 billion souls waited to learn their fate. High Counselor stood at the center podium, his 4 arms trembling as he addressed the assembly. His silver skin had turned pale gray from stress, and his voice carried the weight of a leader watching his people face extinction. "We have 18 months," said. "Our scientists confirm the timeline. After that, the star will consume all 3 of our worlds. We beg the Assembly for assistance." Elder of the Empire rose from his elevated seat. They were the oldest species in the galaxy, their civilization spanning over 1,000,000 years. When spoke, others listened. "We have studied the problem extensively," announced. His deep voice echoed through the chamber. "Our calculations show that evacuation is mathematically impossible. Using every available ship from every member species, we could save approximately 800 million, perhaps less." Gasps rippled through the gathered representatives. 800 million out of 12 billion. It was barely a fraction. "The logistics cannot be overcome," continued. "The distances are too great, the populations too large, the time too short. We recommend focusing resources on preserving cultural artifacts and genetic samples for future restoration efforts." His legs buckled slightly. Cultural artifacts, genetic samples. They were talking about letting his people die and keeping museum pieces as souvenirs. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy expressed their regrets. The Alliance cited resource limitations. The Collective mentioned the economic impossibility. The Dominion simply stated they would not waste ships on a doomed mission. In the far corner of the chamber, where the smallest delegation sat, Ambassador Porter of Earth listened quietly. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and calm eyes. Beside him sat Captain Daniel Hayes and Dr. Morgan, both wearing the simple blue uniforms of Earth's United Space Command. "They're giving up," whispered. "They haven't even tried." Daniel nodded slowly. He had seen the same calculations they presented. The numbers were indeed impossible by conventional thinking. But Daniel had learned long ago that conventional thinking was just another word for limited imagination. "Stood up." The movement was so unexpected that several nearby delegates turned to look. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Assembly 11 years ago. They were considered primitive by galactic standards, their technology generations behind the major powers. Most species had forgotten they were even present. "The human delegation wishes to speak," announced. Elder raised one eyebrow. "The floor recognizes Earth's representative, though I cannot imagine what a species of your development level could contribute to this discussion." Smiled politely. "Humanity volunteers to lead the rescue mission. We will save the people." Silence. Then laughter. It started small, a chuckle from the section, then spread across the chamber. Representatives from a dozen species found the statement hilarious. The youngest, weakest member of the assembly claiming they would accomplish what the greatest civilizations declared impossible. Did not laugh. He stared at the human ambassador with desperate hope fighting against bitter experience. "You cannot be serious. Your fleet is tiny. Your technology is primitive. How could you possibly succeed where others will not even attempt?" "Because we refuse to accept that it cannot be done," replied simply. "Give us the mission. Let us try." Elder leaned forward. "Ambassador Porter, I mean no disrespect, but your species has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. We have been studying the stars for 1,000,000 years. Our calculations are not guesses. They are certainties. You will fail." "Then we will fail trying," Daniel said, rising to stand beside. "But we will not fail for lack of effort. We will not fail because we decided 12 billion lives were not worth the attempt." The laughter faded. Something in Daniel's voice cut through the amusement. He spoke without anger, without desperation, just simple, quiet certainty. Stepped forward and activated her personal display. We have already begun preliminary analysis. The calculations assume standard evacuation protocols. We believe there are alternative approaches that have not been considered. Such as? Asked, his tone somewhere between curiosity and condescension. We would rather show you than tell you, answered. Results speak louder than theories. The assembly chamber buzzed with confused murmurs. This was not how things worked. Junior species did not challenge the wisdom of ancient empires. They did not volunteer for suicide missions with calm smiles and quiet confidence. After the session ended, Elder approached the human delegation privately. His massive frame towered over them, but his expression was not hostile. It was almost concerned. I have lived for 3,000 years, said softly. I have seen young species rise with ambition and fall with hubris. I am warning you as a courtesy. If you fail this mission, humanity's reputation will be destroyed. The assembly will view you as foolish children playing at being adults. You will never recover. Nodded respectfully. We appreciate the warning, Elder, truly. But humanity has a long history of doing things that others called impossible. We once thought flying was impossible. We once thought reaching our own moon was impossible. We once thought surviving our own self-destruction was impossible. Yet here we stand. This is different, insisted. This is not conquering your own limitations. This is defying the laws of physics and logistics on a galactic scale. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder and looked up at the ancient alien. Elder, where we come from, we have a saying. When someone tells us something cannot be done, we simply reply, we can do it. And then we find a way. Studied the human's face for a long moment. He found no arrogance there, no foolish pride. Only a strange, unshakable belief that effort could overcome any obstacle. I hope you are right, said finally. For the sake, I truly hope you are right. As the elder walked away, turned to her companions. We have 18 months to save 12 billion lives across 3 planets. Our fleet is a fraction of what we need. Our technology is behind everyone else's, and the entire galaxy expects us to fail. Daniel smiled slightly. Sounds like a Tuesday. Laughed quietly and clapped him on the back. Send the message to Earth. Tell them we have work to do. Across the galaxy, on a small blue planet, humanity was about to prove that impossible was just another word for not yet accomplished. The message reached Earth within hours. By the next morning, it had spread to every nation, every city, every home with a screen or speaker. 12 billion lives. 18 months. The galaxy says it cannot be done. The response was immediate. Admiral Murray stood in the command center of Earth's United Space Command, watching the screens fill with incoming communications. Volunteers were registering faster than the systems could process them. Engineers, doctors, pilots, construction workers, teachers, farmers. People from every profession and every country were offering their skills, their time, their lives if necessary. How many ships can we actually deploy? Asked his logistics officer. Lieutenant Commander Chris looked up from his console. He was a young man with tired eyes and a mind built for solving puzzles. Currently, we have 412 vessels capable of deep space travel. They said we would need 8,000 to evacuate even a fraction of the population. Then we need to think differently, replied. What about civilian vessels, commercial transports, anything that can hold atmosphere and move through space? Chris paused, his fingers flying over the keyboard. If we convert cargo haulers, mining ships, and civilian cruise vessels, we could potentially add another 2,000 units, but they would need modifications for life support capacity. Start the modifications today. Meanwhile, in a research facility on the other side of the planet, Dr. Morgan was presenting her alternative approach to a room full of skeptical scientists. The holographic model of the star system, rotated slowly above the conference table. They are focused entirely on evacuation because they assume the star's collapse is inevitable, explained. But what if we could slow the collapse? What if we could buy more time? Dr. Laura, an astrophysicist who had spent her career studying stellar mechanics, leaned forward with interest. You are talking about stellar manipulation. No one has ever successfully stabilized a dying star. No one has tried with the methods I am proposing, replied. She zoomed the display to show specific points around the star. Gravity anchors, massive devices positioned at precise orbital points to redistribute gravitational stress. In theory, they could extend the star's stability by years. In theory, another scientist repeated doubtfully. Theory is where everything starts, answered. We have the mathematical models. We have the engineering concepts. What we need is the will to attempt it. Laura studied the display carefully. The mathematics were elegant, almost beautiful in their precision. Even if this works, we would need to construct these anchors in the system itself, under lethal radiation conditions, with a timeline that gives us no room for error. Nodded, I never said it would be easy. I said it was possible. The room fell silent. Then Laura smiled and stood up. Tell me what you need, I am in. Within weeks, the human fleet began its journey. 400 military vessels led the way, followed by thousands of converted civilian ships. They stretched across space like a river of lights, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching the stars stream past. His crew worked with quiet efficiency around him, each person focused on their role in the mission ahead. Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Assembly Observation Team, his communications officer reported. They request permission to accompany our fleet. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Observation Team. Elder has assigned a group of scientists to document our mission. They say it is for historical purposes. They want to watch us fail, Daniel's first officer muttered. Perhaps, Daniel acknowledged. Or perhaps they want to understand how we approach problems. Either way, grant them permission. Let them see everything. We have nothing to hide. The fleet arrived in the system to a reception that Daniel had not expected. Thousands of vessels surrounded them, but not in hostility. They formed an honor corridor, their lights flashing in patterns that the translation systems identified as gratitude. High Counselor's voice came through the communication system, thick with emotion. We did not believe you would actually come. The galaxy abandoned us, but you came. All of you came. We said we would, Daniel replied simply. Now let us get to work. The operation began on multiple fronts simultaneously. Sergeant Cole coordinated ground teams across all 3 planets, establishing evacuation staging areas and refugee processing centers. His teams worked alongside officials, learning local systems and adapting their methods to alien needs. In orbit, Ben Torres led the first construction crews toward the anchor sites. The radiation was intense, far beyond what most species could tolerate, but humans proved surprisingly resilient. Their shorter meant their bodies had evolved to handle cellular damage differently. They could work longer shifts in the danger zones than any other species present. How are they doing this? One observer asked, watching the humans float through radiation fields that would have killed his own kind in minutes. Stubbornness, his colleague replied. It appears to be a genetic trait. The evacuation process itself was revolutionized by Chris's modular transport system. Instead of treating each ship as a separate unit, he linked vessels together into massive flotillas that shared resources and life support. A single flotilla could carry 10 times the population of individual ships traveling alone. The observers documented everything with growing disbelief. The humans were not just attempting the impossible. They were methodically dismantling every assumption the galaxy had made about what was possible. 3 months into the mission, The first gravity anchor was ready for activation, and Laura stood in the control room, surrounded by screens showing data streams from sensors across the system. "If this does not work, we lose 3 months of construction time," Laura said quietly. "It will work," replied. "The math is solid, the engineering is sound, we built it right." She pressed the activation sequence. For a long moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the sensors began updating. The star's energy output, which had been climbing toward catastrophic levels, began to stabilize. Then it began to decrease. Laura stared at the readings. 6 months. We just bought 6 additional months. Allowed herself a small smile. 3 more anchors to go. Let us keep moving. Across the system, word spread quickly. The humans had done what they said was impossible. They had changed the fate of a star. Elder received the report in his quarters aboard the observation vessel. He read it 3 times, unable to fully accept what the data showed. "Remarkable," he whispered to himself. "Absolutely remarkable." For the first time in his 3,000 years of life, the ancient scientist began to wonder if everything he knew about the limits of possibility might be wrong. The evacuation centers on Prime had become cities of their own. Millions of refugees moved through processing stations each day, their possessions reduced to single bags, their lives uprooted by a dying star. Human medical teams worked alongside doctors, treating injuries, calming fears, and keeping the massive operation running smoothly. Medic Amy wiped sweat from her forehead as she finished treating a young with a broken arm. The child's silver skin had turned nearly white from pain, but Amy's gentle hands and calm voice had helped ease their fear. "You were very brave," Amy told the child through her translator device. "The bone will heal in a few weeks. Try to keep it still." The child's mother bowed deeply, a gesture Amy had learned was the highest form of gratitude. "Why do you help us? Your world is safe. You could have stayed home." Amy paused to consider the question. It was one she had heard many times over the past months. "Because you needed help," she answered simply. "That is reason enough." In orbit above the planet, the second gravity anchor was nearing completion. Ben Torres floated in the construction zone, his radiation suit beeping warnings that he had learned to ignore. His team had been working 12-hour shifts for weeks, welding massive sections of metal together in the harsh environment of space. "Ben, your exposure levels are approaching maximum," his safety officer warned through the communication link. "Just need another 20 minutes, Ben replied, guiding a support beam into position. "We are almost there." "You said that an hour ago." Ben grinned inside his helmet. "And I was right then too. Almost is a flexible word." The truth was, every human on the construction crews was pushing beyond their limits. They rotated shifts constantly, medical teams monitoring them for radiation damage, but no one complained. They were counting on them. Failure was not something any of them were willing to accept. Back on the planet's surface, chaos erupted at Evacuation Center 7 when a transport accident separated hundreds of families. Children screamed for parents. Parents pushed through crowds searching for children. The officials were overwhelmed, their systems unable to handle the sudden surge of panic. Cole and his ground team waded into the chaos with calm determination. They set up identification stations, organized search parties, and began the slow process of reuniting families one by one. In the middle of the confusion, found a small child sitting alone beneath a collapsed shelter. The child could not have been more than 5 years old by human standards. Their large eyes were dry, too exhausted for tears, and they clutched a small fabric toy that had seen better days. "Hey there," said softly, kneeling down to the child's level. "Are you lost?" The child did not respond, checked his translator and tried again in the language. Still nothing. The child simply stared at him with those huge, tired eyes. Sat down beside them. He did not push, did not demand answers. He simply sat and waited, letting the child know that someone was there. After a long time, the child spoke. "My name is I cannot find my family." "Well," replied gently, "we are going to find them together, I promise." He did not know it then, but that promise would shape the rest of the mission. A's family could not be located in the immediate aftermath. The databases were overwhelmed, records incomplete, and millions were scattered across 3 planets and dozens of ships. Made the decision to keep with the human teams while the search continued. The child adapted with surprising resilience. Within days, A had become a fixture around the human operations, learning basic English phrases and helping translate between human workers and civilians. The child's presence seemed to remind everyone why they were there, what they were fighting for. Amy took a particular interest in A's, making sure the child ate properly and slept enough. "You remind me of my niece back home," she told A one evening. "She is brave like you." "What is brave?" A asked. Amy thought about it. "Brave is when you are scared but you keep going anyway. Brave is when things are hard but you do not give up." A considered this seriously. "Then humans are very brave. You came here when everyone else said no." "We try to be," Amy answered. "Sometimes we fail, but we always try." The second gravity anchor activated successfully, buying another 4 months. The star's collapse was now projected to be nearly 3 years away instead of the original 18 months. The evacuation timeline had transformed from impossible to merely extremely difficult. The observation team continued documenting everything. Their reports back to the assembly had shifted in tone from skeptical analysis to something approaching admiration. Elder himself spent hours interviewing human crew members, trying to understand what drove them. "Your species has been spacefaring for less than 200 years, said during one conversation with Captain Daniel Hayes. "My people have existed for over 1,000,000 years. We have developed technologies beyond your comprehension, yet you have accomplished in months what we declared impossible. How?" Daniel leaned back in his chair and considered the question carefully. "I think it is because we have not lived long enough to learn what is impossible. Every generation of humans faces challenges that seem insurmountable, and every generation finds ways to overcome them. It is not intelligence or technology. It is just who we are." "But you must have doubts," pressed. "You must sometimes fear that you will fail." "Of course we do," Daniel admitted. "Every day. But doubt is not the same as surrender. We feel the fear and then we get back to work." Was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked Daniel completely. The ancient alien bowed his head in respect. "I have been alive for 3,000 years, said quietly. "I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have watched species achieve greatness and crumble into dust, but I have never seen anything quite like humanity. You are either the bravest or the most foolish creatures in the galaxy, perhaps both." Daniel smiled. "We prefer to think of it as optimistic stubbornness." As the third gravity anchor began construction, the galaxy watched with growing amazement. The humans were actually doing it. Against all odds, against all calculations, against the certainty of failure that every other species had accepted, they were actually doing it. And they were just getting started. The disaster struck without warning. Morgan was reviewing construction schedules when the alarms began screaming across every ship in the fleet. The star, which had been stabilizing so beautifully, suddenly erupted with a massive solar flare. The wave of energy tore through space at incredible speed, heading directly for the gravity anchor network. "All personnel evacuate the construction zones immediately," shouted into her communication device. "This is not a drill, everyone out now." But there was not enough time. The flare struck the second and third gravity anchors with devastating force. Systems that had taken months to build were damaged in seconds. The carefully balanced network that was holding the star stable began to collapse. Captain Daniel Hayes reached the command center just as the damage reports started flooding in. His face remained calm, even as the numbers told him everything was falling apart. 2 anchors are offline, his operations officer reported. The third is functioning at 40% capacity. Our timeline just collapsed from 3 years back down to 8 months. 8 months. They were back where they had started, but now with millions of already in transit and billions more waiting for rescue. The carefully planned evacuation schedule was suddenly worthless. Worse, there were still construction crews in the affected zones. Pilot Shaw was already running toward the hangar bay before the call came through. She had been flying rescue missions for 6 months, pulling workers out of dangerous situations that would have killed anyone else. But this was different. This was dozens of crews scattered across a radiation field that had just been supercharged by the flare. The radiation levels out there are beyond anything we have seen, Flight Control warned her. Your suits will not last more than 30 minutes. Then I better fly fast, replied, climbing into her rescue shuttle. She launched into the burning space between the damaged anchors, her sensors screaming warnings that she forced herself to ignore. Through the cockpit window, she could see the construction platforms, some intact, others twisted into unrecognizable shapes. I have visual on survivors at Platform 7, she reported, moving to extract. The rescue took 4 hours, made 7 separate trips into the radiation zone, each time pushing her shuttle further than it was designed to go. Other pilots joined her, forming a chain of rescue vehicles that pulled workers to safety one group at a time. Ben Torres was among the last to be rescued. His suit was failing, his skin already showing the marks of radiation burns, but he was alive. As the medical teams rushed him to treatment, he grabbed his arm. We can still fix the anchors, he said through cracked lips. I saw the damage. It is bad, but not impossible. We can rebuild. Dr. Peter, the fleet's chief trauma specialist, worked through the night treating the injured. 17 human crew members had been killed in the flare. Dozens more were seriously hurt. The medical bays were full and more patients kept arriving. How bad is it? Daniel asked, visiting the medical center in the early hours. Peter looked at him with exhausted eyes. We lost good people today. People who came here to help strangers from another world. People who knew the risks and came anyway. Daniel nodded slowly. Will you keep going? Of course, Peter replied without hesitation. We have not finished yet. The Assembly Observation Team sent urgent messages recommending that humanity withdraw from the mission. The Alliance offered to send transport ships to evacuate human personnel. Even Elder, who had grown to admire the humans, suggested that perhaps they had done enough. Daniel gathered his senior officers and the leadership for an emergency meeting. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Everyone knew what was being discussed. Everyone knew what withdrawal would mean for the billions still waiting for rescue. The galaxy is giving us permission to quit, Daniel said calmly. They are telling us we have already exceeded expectations, that no one would blame us for walking away. High Counselor stood in the corner, his silver skin pale with despair. He had allowed himself to hope when the humans arrived. Now that hope was crumbling. Stepped forward with her. I have been working on a redesign of the anchor network. The new configuration is riskier, but it can be built faster. If we start immediately, we can have all 4 anchors operational within 5 months. The radiation levels are still elevated, someone pointed out. Construction crews would be working in even more dangerous conditions than before. I know, acknowledged, but we can adapt our rotation schedules. Shorter shifts, more personnel, constant medical monitoring. It can be done. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was proposing. More sacrifice, more risk, more humans putting themselves in harm's way for people they had never met before this mission began. Daniel looked around at his officers, at the leaders, at the weight of 12 billion lives resting on their decision. Then he turned to. "We are not leaving," Daniel said simply. "We said we would save your people, and we will." His composure broke. The High Counselor of the Empire, leader of 3 worlds and billions of citizens, wept openly. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Why do you keep going? You owe us nothing." Daniel considered the question. "Because this is who we are. We do not abandon people in need. We do not give up because things get hard. We adapt. We overcome. And we finish what we start." Work resumed within hours. Fresh crews replaced the injured. New materials were shipped from Earth at emergency speed. The entire human fleet reorganized itself around the revised timeline. And something else happened. The who had been passive recipients of rescue began volunteering to help. They learned to work alongside human crews. They donated resources from their own remaining supplies. The small child that had found alone served as a translator between teams, helping coordinate efforts with a maturity far beyond their years. 5 months later, the 4th gravity anchor activated. The star, which had threatened to destroy everything, settled into stable operation. The timeline extended to 7 years. Elder broadcast his findings to the entire Galactic Assembly. His voice carried across thousands of light years to hundreds of listening species. "I was wrong," he said simply. "We were all wrong. The humans did not succeed because they were smarter or stronger than us. They succeeded because they refused to accept defeat. They looked at the impossible and said they could do it. And then they did." The galaxy had learned something new that day. Something about a young species that did not know the meaning of impossible. Something about humans. 2 years after the first human ship entered the system, the final evacuation transport departed from Prime. Its cargo was not refugees but celebration. The last residents of the old worlds were leaving not as desperate survivors but as citizens of a new beginning. The numbers were staggering. 11.7 billion had been saved. New colony worlds had been established across 3 different star systems, each one carefully chosen for long-term habitability. The infrastructure for an entirely new civilization was already being built. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the observation deck of his ship, watching the planet shrink in the distance. The world that had been doomed was now stable, its star held in check by 4 gravity anchors that would continue operating for centuries. Eventually, they would return. But for now, they had new homes waiting for them. "The Assembly is requesting your presence at the formal ceremony," his communications officer reported. Daniel nodded wearily. He had been avoiding ceremonies for months, preferring to focus on the work. But this one was different. This one marked the end. The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly was transformed from the grim council room where humanity had first volunteered. Banners of every member species hung from the ceiling. Representatives from across known space filled every seat. And in the center, where the dying star had once been displayed, a new hologram showed the flourishing colonies. High Counselor spoke first. His voice was strong now, filled with a confidence that had been missing 2 years ago. "We stand here today because of a miracle," announced. "Not a miracle of chance or divine intervention, a miracle of will. When every advanced civilization in this galaxy told us our people were doomed, one young species said no. They said they could do it, and then they did." The chamber erupted in applause that lasted several minutes. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive children now rose to their feet in respect. The youngest member of the Assembly had become its most celebrated. Ambassador Porter accepted the formal recognition with characteristic humility. "We did not do this for glory," he said. "We did not do this to prove anything. We did this because 12 billion people needed help, and we were able to give it. That is all the reason anyone should ever need." But the Assembly wanted to give more than words. For the first time in galactic history, a species less than 3 centuries old was offered senior council membership. The vote was unanimous. Accepted gracefully. Humanity will serve this assembly with honor, but we hope our example shows something more important than any political position. We hope it shows that the impossible is just a word, not a boundary. After the formal ceremony came the smaller celebrations. Dr. Morgan received the Assembly's highest scientific honor for her gravity anchor innovation. The Academy of Sciences, which had declared her theories fantasy, now named a prize after her. "I did not invent anything new," said during her acceptance speech. "I just refused to believe that the old rules were the only rules. Every breakthrough in history came from someone willing to question what everyone else accepted as truth." Dr. Laura stood beside her, sharing the moment. The two women who had stabilized a star together were already planning their next project. The galaxy, they had decided, had too many impossible problems that needed solving. In a quiet corner of Nexus Station, Captain Daniel Hayes attended to a more personal matter. The small child who had been lost in the chaos of evacuation was finally being reunited with family. After 2 years of searching through refugee databases and colony registries, Cole's team had found them. I had grown during the mission. The frightened child who had sat alone beneath a collapsed shelter was now a confident young person who spoke 3 languages and had helped coordinate countless rescue operations. The humans had become family to them in every way that mattered. "I do not want to leave," I told Daniel before the reunion. "The humans are my family now." Daniel knelt down to look the child in the eyes. "We will always be your family. That does not end because you are going home. Family is not about where you live. It is about who you carry in your heart." The reunion was emotional beyond words. A's parents had survived, along with 2 siblings who had been separated during the early evacuations. They had searched for their youngest child for 2 years, never giving up hope. When the family embraced, Daniel stepped back quietly, stood beside him, both men watching the scene with full hearts. "Worth it," said simply. "Every minute," Daniel agreed. Elder released his documentary to the entire galaxy. It was titled simply, The Human Way. The film showed everything from the first assembly meeting to the final evacuations. It captured the determination in human faces as they worked impossible hours. It recorded the sacrifices made and the prices paid, and it documented the quiet moments of kindness that defined the entire mission. The documentary ended with a montage of civilians speaking about their experiences. One after another, they shared what the humans had meant to them. One elderly, who had lost everything when the evacuation began, summarized it perfectly. "They came from a world far away," the elder said. "They had nothing to gain and everything to lose. They could have stayed home where it was safe, but they came anyway. They came because we needed them. I will teach my about humans. I will teach them that the galaxy is not as cold as it sometimes seems. That somewhere out there, among the stars, there are creatures who will cross the universe to help strangers." On Earth, the returning heroes were welcomed with celebrations that lasted for days, but most of them did not linger long. There were other missions calling, other problems that needed solving, other impossible tasks waiting to become possible. A young stood on one of the new colony worlds, looking up at the night sky. Their parent knelt beside them, pointing to a cluster of stars where human ships were passing on their way to the next mission. "Who are they?" the young one asked. The parent smiled and placed a gentle hand on their child's shoulder. "They are humans. When our world was dying and everyone said we could not be saved, they came to help us. The whole galaxy said it was impossible. They said it could not be done." "But it was done," the young one said. "Yes," the parent replied, "because humans do not accept impossible. They just say they can do it, and then they do." The human ships faded into the distance, their lights blending with the stars. But their legacy remained, written across 3 new colony worlds and 11 billion grateful hearts. They said they could do it. and they surpassed every expectation.